live now. Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I was trying this again. For whatever reason, we had a little bit of difficulties the first time around, so I decided to light this candle one more time. As I said before, just in case you weren't with me the first time around, I have with me on the line Billy Taylor. Billy Taylor is activist. He's a lead organizer for executive director of Philly.fyi. He was one of the lead organizers in essentially protesting the DNC, essentially the fraudulent primary that taken place. Now, the way I remember Billy is he latched himself onto a podium behind Bernie Sanders and started screaming at him. Now, like I said before, when I saw that video, I came on and immediately did a video, somewhat panicked and hysterical, screaming that the guy was a lunatic and that he was a Hillary supporter that was raged out of his gorge, and they had essentially carried him away because the only thing I heard was Russia. Now, that wasn't true, though. He was doing that because he was protesting the fact that Bernie Sanders was essentially pushing the Russia hysteria and wasn't calling out this kind of bogus cheating. Now, just so you guys can know what I'm talking about, this is the video itself that I and the world saw. So I'm going to show this, and we'll be back to talk to Billy himself. So just...
What John's campaign is about, and what the progressive message is about, is that we are going to transform this country and create a government that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. There is no reason why we remain the only major country on...
Now, at some point, the security carted him away. Now, Billy, you're here. Please tell everyone hello.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And Jamar, thank you for having me on the show today.
No, I'm happy to have you on. Now, what was going on there? Because, it's hard to tell from where we are looking at it what was exactly going on. And like I said, I was somewhat hysterical at the end of that because I thought, oh my God, this man is going to kill Bernie Sanders. But what was actually taking place?
I guess I'll start from the beginning. Serving as executive director of Philly.fyi, we held the majority of the permits for Philadelphia. We held so many that it was said that we owned the city of Philadelphia for one of the most highly anticipated political events. So we organized, not only meetings with local organizations, protests, the city, but as well as, Bernie Sanders camp also. So we're in communication with them. I kind of want to stress how much, I've dedicated to Sanders, and I'd like for him to run 2020. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing as well, because there's certain issues he has to address to rebuild his support base back up. Yeah. And with this demonstration, I was very vocal on protesting Bernie leading up to that point. I actually even reached out to Sanders, directly and multiple ways as well. To try and have a meeting with Sanders to avoid demonstrating. So I was very vocal. One of my hashtags is the bullhorn. So when I went there, first they knew I was coming. I had 3 officers come up to me. They asked me, I see there's a bullhorn around your neck. And I said, maybe I'm a big Bernie supporter. You Google me, you'll find out, And so I'm standing by the stage waiting, and I had literally 2 cops in behind me about 3 feet away the entire time. Yeah. They knew I was there to protest, but they didn't know what I was going to do. They assumed I was just going to go around in the crowd with a bullhorn. It's one of the reasons why they had their PA up so loud. It's the loudest I've ever heard for 200-300 participants. So they wanted to drown that bullhorn out. Yeah. So I one thing I will give Bernie credit for, because before he went on stage, I sacrificed and dedicated a lot towards the Sanders camp. Just to see him, I guess, bow down and cater to the corruption he claimed to fight against. So before he went on the stage, there was a stare between Sanders and I as well. I guess it was his campaign manager. I have to give it to him. In his old age, he did not stare down. but they knew I was there. And once Sanders took stage, that's when I hopped the rail. I hopped it so fast the cops were behind me, couldn't grab me. I had it all prepped beforehand where I got a 15-foot length chain. I padlocked one end of it around my waist. And then I had it all set up where the lock was ready to take out of my pocket and just, wrap around the guardrail and lock myself to it.
Yeah.
Now, they got me so quick that I did have a banner, but I wasn't able to do the banner drop just because the way it kind of happened. I figured I had a little bit more time before they moved on the stage. But it said, how can he fight for us when he took his lies that silenced us? And that was in reference to the Russia propaganda that he was promoting.
Yeah. The Russia propaganda, and I guess that's where it comes down to. What was the impetus? I mean, the impetus for you to do this was ultimately, I supported you, you had a bunch of people supporting you, and now you're essentially going back and supporting the thing to which you were originally against. I mean, is that what it boils down to? Not to mention the Russia propaganda being this kind of cover for what took place in the primaries.
Well, there's a number of different reasons for Sanders. One of the things Sanders said multiple times was he ran as a Democrat to push Hillary left.
Yeah.
Well, who's there pushing Bernie left? There's no one there. When he speaks of accountability, which he speaks about this a lot. I read article after article today for him calling for accountability on Trump, even an old article in reference to holding Hillary accountable for the next 4 years. So when it comes to accountability, we had nothing as far as the voter suppression and election fraud that happened throughout the United States. And there's mountains of proof to prove it. But when he goes and starts peddling the Russian narrative, which essentially is Hillary-gate that we're talking about, that's where I start to have a problem. Too many people are falling in behind Bernie as if you elect one person and our job's done. And that is not the case. At this point in time, the Bernie we all fought for, that's not the Bernie we're seeing today. It's catering to the establishment and big money, promoting their agenda.
Well, wait. Catering to the establishment and big money. Why do you believe he's doing that? Because let me ask you this. Do you honestly believe that Sanders has changed? Like, he's been this way for like 40 years and then all of a sudden he's changed on a dime. So there has to be some incentive for him to change, otherwise he wouldn't have changed. What is the thing that you believe is incentivizing him to behave in the way that he's behaving as opposed to the way he behaved for the prior 40 years?
Well, we can sit here and speculate all day long, but it's just speculation or it's, opinion. What would actually happen, no one will ever know but Bernie Sanders. Is what he's saying publicly what happened? More than likely no. The majority of people have it in their hearts and minds that when Bernie came out of the meeting with Obama, because of the expression on his face, really that picture could tell 1,000 stories.
Yeah.
My issue with Sanders on that level is he's been into politics for over 30 years. He realizes the history of our government. He knows fully about Martin Luther King, JFK. To give you an example, the permits were in my name, and I had an entire police station search my entire shop. I had 3 trucks. At the time, there was a fleet of Black Men for Bernie vans here. I understood what I was, the consequences of what could happen. I had multiple lawyers willing to represent me because it was expected for me to go to jail. I accepted that. So Bernie knew long before running as president, what may happen, the consequences of that action. If he wasn't willing to accept those consequences, he could have never stepped up and had, tens of thousands, millions of people throughout the United States engaged in this process, let alone come to Philadelphia to fight him.
What consequences? Be explicit. What are you talking about? You think that they threatened to whack Bernie Sanders?
Well, I mean, look, I know this. As an activist, I've traveled the nation. I've been to the largest, smallest, most radical, peaceful, you name it, I've seen it all. Yeah. And I've seen everybody be tainted with low-level stardom on money. And those that can't, I come from punk rock roots, and you never sell out, but for those that won't sell out, they'll come after your family. So there's a number of things that they could have, did to Sanders. But this is how our government operates. These are facts. Look at what happened to Seth Rice. No one really knows. Botched murder they're claiming, but there goes one mysterious murder during that process right, there alone.
It's true that these things are to some degree facts. I mean, there are facts. It depends on what facts you're talking about. But it's somewhat of a, you don't think it's a little bit hyperbolic to say that they might have threatened to whack Bernie Sanders? And is it possible that Bernie Sanders may want to run in 2020 and Bernie Sanders believes that he needs to toe a line to run in 2020? Is that more possible, more likely, as opposed to the incentive, a threat against Sanders' life?
I think when you lay down with dogs, you'll rise with fleas. The Bernie that we supported in 2016 wasn't a Bernie that was going to work with the establishment or the corruption that's happening.
There was a Bernie that didn't think he could win the presidency.
No, granted, a year before that, he was speaking to an easy up with 13 people, no name recognition or campaign finance. And a year later, they're still in stadiums. But if you're not in it to win it, then why was he in it in the first place?
Because he wanted to push the conversation to the left.
So it was mainly a protest.
Yes. When Bernie Sanders, when you read some of the stuff associated with the election, it became rather clear that Bernie Sanders didn't think Bernie Sanders was going to win. Bernie Sanders got in that race because he wanted to push Hillary Clinton to the left. And somewhere along the way, he was like, holy shit, people are feeling this, in which case it became, oh my God, I have the chance to win. But beforehand, no, he didn't think he could win.
You're absolutely right. Again, we had meetings with high campaign staff from Bernie Sanders. I was a member of a number of different works. One of them was a socialist alternative, and that's one of the things they said in their letterhead. Bernie was there to get on the Democratic stage and speak truth to power to the people. He never thought he would be president, but now he's in this position. Going into the convention, do you cater to the establishment or do you cater to the people? There could have been a real revolution. Bernie was looking for permits in Philadelphia. That's one of the reasons why I applied for so many, was to give him the permits he wanted. Yeah. And he had a decision there. He can either come join the people in the streets or really cater to the establishment. And he chose that.
Now, that part I agree with you. That part I agree with you.
Now, right now, because of that, he's hurting the movement. The only way that I could explain it is, look, one, if he's not willing to accept the responsibilities of his actions, I get all that. But, don't sheepdog, because then that's what it would be. But the other part of it is you're talking about an individual that has made his career on the protest vote as a third-party candidate. Yeah. Now, the reason why he didn't join us in the streets is because we were encouraging him to accept Jill Stein's offer, because we were in contact. We had meetings with Jill Stein's campaign as well. I'm the guy that gave Jill Stein the permits for FDR Park. I got her permits. The platform was almost identical. He was a third-party candidate all his life. It's perfect, right? But he didn't. He decided, again, to cater to the establishment. There's a new Facebook episode called The Swamp, and it's about Tea Party candidates, but it explains how the House actually works. So once you go to the, other political figures and you want something such as healthcare for all, that's when they got you. And I think that's pretty much what Bernie's caught up into. He's too far invested now with the establishment to pull. He's done everything that they've asked of him. So to pull out at this point means he's back to ground zero. But he's also, in my opinion, hurting this movement at this time, because with leaders, look, it's like someone explained it to me like this: with a flock of geese, say a hunter pops up out of nowhere and shoots that bird that's up front at the point. Now there may be chaos and disoriented a little bit, but another bird steps up to that lead position, will lead that flock. So the thing about leaders is there will always be leaders. Now Bernie's sheepdog, and he's taken, he's telling everybody exactly what they want to hear, and it's keeping everybody at bay instead of really getting motivated, working and taking action and into their own hands, and trying to have some kind of accountability and justice for the 2016 election. He certainly isn't doing that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no,
Finish.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Finish. I've heard this. So I to some degree I agree with you. So assume for the moment that Sanders runs in 2020. I guess my feeling is we put all our eggs in one basket. Sanders runs in 2020. Let's say Sanders loses. Then what? Like, it seems like it's all decapitated. Like, ultimately, it seems that the plan or the strategy that the left has taken up is Sanders needs to win. Or at the very least, Sanders is going to be the lead person to win. And I don't necessarily know if that's true. I agree with you. For the most part, it's at the end of that process, assume for the moment that Sanders had went and started a third party. He said, I'm grabbing Tulsi Gabbard, I'm grabbing Nina Turner, I'm grabbing whoever else, and we're going to start a third party. Well, at that point, you have the time frame to start a something, as opposed to, I guess, this kind of let's get everybody in the Democratic Party and then let's hope something happens. That's a little different. I agree with you on this.
Well, here goes something. He wants to take over the party. Let me ask you this. The Democratic Party is a well-oiled machine. At this point, it's very well-oiled. So to bring down the Democratic Party it's almost impossible to do. And they have it set up that way. Literally, the corruption is legal, what they do.
Yeah.
Gerrymandering, to give you an example. So is it easier to, now he talked about a political revolution, and I get the whole protest, speaking power to the people. But when you call for a political revolution, you call for people to be involved like they were, just to, we fought vigorously for him all the way through and never gave up. He did. And that's where he messed up. So going into 2020, well, there's two things. Well, taking over the Green Party would be a lot easier than the Democratic Party. So his ideas, I mean, we could literally reform, remold the Green Party, which is almost identical to the platform Bernie ran on anyway. Yeah. That would have been a revolution. Bernie would have joined us in the streets. It would have gave the Green Party enough oomph, because Bernie has folks that will follow him to the end of the earth.
Yeah,
they only feel him godlike, which is funny because when I protest them, I see individuals questioning their own religion or God. But when you go to question Bernie Sanders, no, don't do that. So I have to say godlike.
It's like, how dare you, sir, questioning Bernie Sanders? That man is bleeding for us. Yeah.
Right. Well, now this puppet show that he's putting on, that's all fine and dandy. But, there's two things. Expect the Trump presidency. There's only been 2 or 3 times in U.S. history that a president hasn't received a second term. So history has shown us we will see a Trump presidency. Another thing to keep an eye on is right now the current system is there's 2 terms Democrat, 2 terms Republican, 2 terms Democrat, 2 terms Republican. And it basically gives each side just enough where the other side starts getting mad about what's going on, and then they swap. Yeah. So it's just enough to keep everybody at bay. It's a puppet show. I can't tell you how involved in this process I was to personally witness what goes on. So going into 2020, if they select Bernie, because he would be selected, one, I doubt him winning against Trump presidency. You got Trump going around going the elections are rigged. Now you put him, he's one of the most powerful people in the United States. He's the president. During a rigged system, he can rig it whatever way he wants. So there's a lot of reasons why I say expect a Trump presidency. So don't put too much effort into 2020. We really need to focus on 2024. Next, with Bernie, he's sheep herding. He's keeping tensions at bay in America, where people are not being engaged enough. For them to be engaged and active in this process, which we need more to be able to have the change we want, they have to be effective somehow. So with Bernie easing the tensions throughout the United States, he's stopping a revolution from happening. And again, like I said earlier, he's taking a position that another, Democrat or young individual could be taken. If he's not going to do it, throw his weight in behind someone that will.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me read a few of the chats because people are getting involved. I have a comment about that. I massively disagree with that. but let not massively. Massively is too strong. I think it's funny. I had Progressive Patriot on here, Sarah Reynolds, and she's a Bernie Sanders supporter, and she turned over to be a Trump supporter, and she's like, "Yeah, Trump is going to win in 2020." And I got to be honest, I don't know why you guys believe that. But let me read that first and we'll talk about it. So, Trudy, Bernie knows he's our only hope and has to do what it takes to push his goals. He's keeping his eye on that end. Sure, I'm hanging on a thin thread of hope, but it's all I have. I agree with Trudy on this. Trudy and I bump heads sometimes in the best of ways. She's awesome. I agree with her on this. Elephants on Coke. I think it's possible they threatened to go after Jane Sanders for a time at Burlington College. A lot of something was made of nothing in the media. So that's an interesting thing, Elephants on Coke, because if you remember, they were threatening a lawsuit against Jane Sanders. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a lawsuit. It was some kind of, bogus stuff that they brought her up on. But I thought that was Republicans, not Democrats. But to be honest, it could have been both. Expanding Electrons. I love that name. I love that name. Expanding Electrons. Jesse Jill 2020. I have Bernie 2020 bumper stickers on my car, but let's be real. Well, let's be real. What do you mean, let's be real? Sir bikes a lot a day. I remember seeing a story about the Secret Service picking up Sanders' grandkids after school when they weren't supposed to, May 2016. All right, I don't know Sir bikes a lot. I have to read that one. I haven't found that one. So back to this one. I don't think Trump will beat Sanders. I just don't. And if Sanders is selected, even if you're right, even if he's selected, Donald Trump barely won the last election, and the election was won, you can make an argument, primarily because of the shaving off certain sections of the electorate in certain states. And Hillary Clinton was too weak, or at the very least, how they have this sketchy thing about going after the elections to make sure the elections are sound and secure. Why do you think he would beat Sanders? Like, that's the part I don't get. Sanders seems, when any of the polls that were taking place between Sanders and anybody else that was on the Republican side, he trounced them. Of all of them, he trounced Trump the worst. And I suspect that has to do with Trump's bonuses are essentially eliminated by Bernie Sanders' bonuses. Now, why do you think that's not true?
All right. Well, way back to the beginning. There's two things I just want to address real quick. Yeah. She was being investigated, Jane Sanders, in reference to the $600,000 house that they bought after the election,
right?
Because of reporting their income, differently than they should have. Next, one big thing Bernie would speak about and being against is, umbrella packages, those bonus packages, CEOs walk away from companies and so on. Well, Jane Sanders, the campus that she ran, she expanded it, and it basically, I'm not sure if it went bankrupt or it was about to go bankrupt, but they had to let it go.
But that wasn't illegal. I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's okay. She left with a $200,000 umbrella package. So here, these are individuals speaking about being against something, but yet they, when they can benefit off of it, they take advantage of it. So that I do want to kind of say. Next, when it comes to Bernie Sanders, one of the reasons why a lot of people ran for him was because he didn't muddy the water. He didn't throw mud.
Yes.
He was a candidate like no one's seen before. Maybe he's tainted, because if he did, say he does run as a Democrat and he goes for that, he wins. Well, it's a corrupted, rigged game. The system itself is rigged. Everything from, the voter machines, that's something that wasn't even spoken about last election. We're hooked on everything else, election reform, voter ID laws, and so on and so forth, open primaries and gerrymandering. We didn't even get to the, rigged electronic voter machines. So Sanders wins. By that definition, everybody knows it's a rigged, corrupted system. Doesn't that mean Sanders is rigged and corrupted in order to win? I mean, we all know, Trump's outspoken about Hillary cheating, so he must have cheated as well in order to beat her. Well, if they're cheating and rigging all the way through in order to win, if Bernie does win, doesn't that make him just as bad as what we're fighting against?
Yeah, but that's somewhat circular logic. I mean, that's like saying, well, the system is corrupted, so by definition, if somebody wins, the system is corrupted. But if Bernie Sanders loses, then they cheated because the system is corrupted. Like, it's...
Yeah, but
let me ask you this. The system itself changes, right? I mean, we're not in a static political system. I mean, there were times where things were better, and there were times where things were worse. I mean, in fact, the DNC itself has changed. I mean, what the DNC was, let's say, back during the FDR days, are dramatically different than what they are now. Even for the standpoint of like what Republicans were back then has changed. I'm saying these things do change.
Right. Well, that's what, one of the reasons why I protested Bernie is because what he's offering isn't changed. He's offering for over 30 years with nothing but failure to show of it. Yeah. I mean, besides awakening and having more involved in the political process, those are things long-term that he's done. But issue-based, like he's doing now, is irrelevant, especially in a house where it's this corporation versus that corporation, or this big money versus that big money. Our issues are never heard. So he's preaching about issues. There's nothing long-term that's helping the people. And let's not forget, not me, us was a hashtag. This isn't about Bernie Sanders. This is about the American people. This is, working for a better for our kids and our kids' kids. When he preached about being, against the corruption and wanting to fight the corruption. But when some of the worst corruption in U.S. history happens, and it's during his candidacy as president, and he's silent. He's silent. So he's proven not to be fit to be a leader, because when, the American democracy is not only being threatened but trampled on, he doesn't fight for Americans. Period. He is completely silent. So he showed that he's not fit to lead this country.
What do you think? Let me ask you this. What do you think he should have done? I mean, because I think there's two things. First, this idea of unfit and everything else. The conversation that's taking place in Washington now is dramatically different than the conversation that was taking place at the same time for Obama. Meaning the topics that are up for discussion. You have a socialist that won in New York. Part of the reason that Ocasio was able to win, or for that matter, part of the reason that this idea of socialists has taken on somewhat of a different mantle, I would argue she won because she was calling herself a socialist. Part of that was Sanders. I mean, none of this stuff, none of the conversations that are being had now from the standpoint of education, healthcare. Hell, he's talking about taking bail away from the standpoint of money. The idea that the conversation is even being had is something dramatically different. I remember when Obama was running, you couldn't even barely get Obama to say anything about a public option, let alone this idea of government health care. And you have multiple Democrats signing on to it. Some people are even looking at it as a litmus test. Now, I understand this is not socialism, but from just a basic point of, has the conversation moved? The answer is yes. Is that fair?
No, we got to stem this back to what we were talking about, and that was, Bernie being president and leading this country. I pay homage to Bernie. He's definitely done things that have never been done throughout U.S. history.
I know, but wait. I'm trying to make a point, though. You said it's not about Sanders, it's about a movement, and I'm agreeing with you. That's true. It's not about Sanders. If Sanders get hit by a bus tomorrow, what takes place? It's about whether or not the public or the conversation itself in the nation itself has changed. And I'm saying fundamentally, yes. Even if you take Sanders out of it, the conversation that's being had from the standpoint of what was taking place in 2008 to what is taking place right now from the standpoint of basic normal discourse, even from the standpoint of Democrats, it has changed.
I think he's definitely aroused that. I wouldn't give him full credit for that. I think there's been pain in Americans' hearts and fire in our bellies for long before Sanders came along. He was that spark to ignite our engagement and get us involved, because finally we had a figurehead that we could rally in behind, a figurehead that had a voice. We had a voice. So I do pay homage where it's due. Organizer, he's a great senator, he's a great activist, truth to power, telling the truth to the people. But when it comes to President of the United States or leader, I for one believe the captain goes down with the ship, and the captain, kind of hop, skipped, and jumped on his supporters while they were in the water, while he made it to the land with the DNC. That's the way I feel it.
All right, look, I understand the angst here. I don't want to call it animosity because it doesn't sound like animosity, but I do understand this thing of it burned. It really burned. So I'm not downplaying that. It burned. seeing him after everything that he aroused in people. Because, look, from my understanding and from the way I look and I listen to people when I hear them talk about this stuff, what burns is, here's a vision of what can be. I want a political revolution. Great! We want a political revolution too. Fucking A, ride or die. And then you get to the point of the definition of political revolution to him versus political revolution to us were very different things. And so seeing the guy who screamed for a political revolution turn around and say, vote for Hillary Clinton, that hurts. It burns. You know what I mean? When you see Sanders supporters crying during the DNC convention, that kind of gets across this idea of how much that burned. I guess my only issue with stuff like this is I can accept that that burns, while at the same token acknowledging the shift in the tone and the conversation in this country, and to make that point clear. And I'm trying to get this point across of the stake that's been driven into the United States of leftyism. And I understand that this might have been here before, but nobody was saying it. Nobody was talking about it. And so the space that was created in this case for somebody to stand up and open their mouth saying, look, this is what we can be. And I suspect that space opened up people's eyes. And the animosity here that I think that are thrown around by some, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying that's thrown around by some, this kind of pissed offness comes from this disparity between I can see this and then this guy is walking away from this. It feels like a letdown. And that letdown, I think to some degree, is the pain that people feel associated with this and even the anger associated with it. That said, that space is there. I mean, the conversations that people are having right now, like you have somebody who's openly saying, you know, we need to have a federal jobs guarantee. That's fucking amazing. Beforehand, can you imagine that being said when Obama was running in the race, federal jobs guarantee? Can you imagine Obama even saying Medicare for all? This is stuff that many of the leading Democrats that are running for president have taken on their list of, at the very least, the Medicare for all. It's not that I'm saying that this is the cold kid in caboodle, and this is by no means farther than I would go. My argument here just has to do with the area and the space that's been opened up by somebody who's pushed in the presidential election, who failed, yes, but at the very least, that level of success from the standpoint of opening up the space of conversation should not necessarily be undermined. I think it's real and I think it's genuine.
I think a lot of folks give Bernie too much credit as if he created and made all this, when that's not the case. I think he was just in the right place at the right time. Look at Ralph Nader, Ron Paul, Jill Stein. These are individuals that have been, speaking about the same thing for so long. Why was Bernie able to make it so far? He used the system. He broke it down like a protester by getting on that Democratic state.
Yes, he did. No. I agree with you.
But now where do we go from here? You know, you had said earlier about local politicians, Bernie seeds being elected, socialists being elected. But, you know, from personal experience, I can bear witness that, listen, everybody can be tainted. If they can't taint you with low-level stardom or money, they will absolutely, you know, come after your family. You're talking the richest in the world. You know, you're going up against the elite. So long term, he hasn't done anything because even with the Green Party, I've had disagreements. You know, I was one of the ones to lead a massive deregistration if they were out burning.
Yeah.
I had my disagreements with the Green because individually people can be tainted, and the Green Party isn't in a powerful enough position for the elite to actually start flooding it with corrupted money. So no matter what it is, you know, I'm for a rainbow coalition. That's my end goal. But no matter what it is, you know, Bernie's not doing anything long term. And a lot of people are saying, look, I'm not in this fight to have health care for 8 years until the next president. I'm in this fight so our children, my children, and my children's children, and so on don't have to be fighting these same battles. Now, Bernie only has a voice because we gave him that voice, you know, and he's not using the voice to the best of his capability or maximizing the full potential out of this. When you're talking about, you know, one, we have no accountability or acknowledgement, only excuses to excuse it, meaning you can expect this to happen again for the rigged elections of 2016. Nothing at all. So expect future elections to absolutely hands down be rigged. And then really to get the working class into political positions, which is what he's preaching to do. We need to focus on, I'm putting out feelers to try to unite all third parties under a platform of election reform because our issues aren't heard. So we need to stop with the inner conflict and bickering and come together as Americans to really take back our system. And we need to focus on, I'd like to see a party just made on police and the government, primarily in reference to election reform from top to bottom. Let's be able to fix this process to have the working class elected and not into a corrupt system.
Yeah.
Not only that, how about this accountability for those that actually had their hands or some kind of ties in rigging the elections in 2016. That'll stop future candidates from trying to use those loopholes and backdoors to take advantage of the system, which essentially it's squatting on the American democracy, the American way. I hear Bernie Sanders, and this is really, there's a lot of reasons on this. We kind of veered off because it was the protest with Bernie was in reference to the Russian narrative.
Yeah.
So what I just talked to you about was election reform to get the working class. But there's one other key element to all of this that everybody is overlooking across the board. It's not Russia. It's not Trump. It's not even the Democrats or, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, Hillary rigging the elections. It's none of that. It's censorship of social media platforms. During 2016, something happened that our government never expected. And that was the Americans using social media platforms so potently to battle big money as a free means to campaign that we technically won. Bernie should be president. So the Russiagate narrative, at this point, I think everybody can agree that, they're no longer trying to excuse the rigged elections. Everybody knows. They can't even fight that one to say it. Now it's come to light that, obviously Trump wasn't, in talks with Russia about rigging the elections. So what is it that they are achieving out of the really it's Hillarygate, but the Russian narrative? It's censorship of social media platforms. And this has been happening, we've seen this, we've actually seen this and had, the effects of this 2 months before the DNC. They want to stop our networking capabilities, the tools that we have to battle going into the future. That's the only way we're poor. The working class is poor. We don't have money to campaign. When Bernie ran, he had no name recognition, managed to accumulate in campaign finance $220 million in small donations. But that isn't nothing against the famous Hillary Clinton and $1.2 billion she was able to, gather or raise during her candidacy. So what was it that got Bernie into the position that he did, where essentially he should be president of the United States? What made someone with no money, no name, with use of social media platforms? That's how potent that the social media platforms are. I've done extensive research on the Russiagate, and this was literally as soon as the DNC ended, wanting accountability. My first thought was they're using this to excuse it, which it was originally. It was being used as an excuse for the rigged elections, like Russia did it. But what they first put out was 0.004% was Russia's involvement. But what was it? It was 56% of their ads didn't come until after the elections, and then 26% of it
was
never
nonsense.
seen.
This stuff is nonsense.
Well, right, it comes down to 0.0004%. But out of that percent, which is the actual number, they said there was about 160,000 put as far as money put into posts.
Yeah.
But they took a bunch of numbers, they grouped it together to get that. It was Russian currency, Russian email address. What was it? Russian email address, Russian address.
Yeah, the Russian stuff was nonsense. I mean, they can't even. They're assuming that the people who were in a troll farm, they was just trying to scam for clicks, for money for clicks, is somehow attributable to the Russian government. I mean, this stuff was absolute nonsense.
Out of all that, Russia didn't even, because there was a Russian troll factory. The Internet Research Agency. But they focused on tensions in America, not the elections, and they funded both sides.
Yeah.
Elections didn't even make the top 5. It was 6th on the list as far as what they've, financed for.
Yeah.
They focused on, racial tensions, immigration tensions, gun right, abortion, so on. So what is it they're looking to achieve out of this Russian narrative? They used Russia to fear Americans into taken freedoms away from them for decades. Parents and grandparents went through the same. I can't stress enough about social media platforms, because that is the only tool we have right now to battle fake news, to network, to be able to campaign as potently as we did for the working class. We may not have money, but we have time, passion in these causes that we believe in, we work for. So, with Bernie, I can't tell you my level of frustration. Really originally it was to try to push Bernie left, because I want him to left.
Yeah.
So, who else do we have? We don't have anybody. So, but for him to run in 2020, I know there's a number of issues that he has to address to be able to rebuild his support base. The ones that campaigned, dedicated the most, sacrificed the most, the ones that ran, they're the ones that are hurt the most. And granted, there is, the cheating partner, I guess you could call it. It kind of feels like that, like Bernie cheated on us. But these are the individuals that fought the most vigorously that are now so upset with him, they're against him. So if Bernie has any shot at 2020, he has to rebuild his base and speak to his supporters. I mean, don't you think his supporters deserve a right to have their questions answered?
Oh, I
do.
We
dedicated so much to him.
No, I agree with you. I am not. Look, I don't disagree with you from the standpoint of the Russia stuff. I hate that stuff. I hear Sanders and it kills me. I mean, my subscribers was like, dude, we want to see you do this video with Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders. Like, we want to see the light fall out of your eyes as Bernie Sanders, debases himself with the Russia stuff. So I don't disagree with you for the Russia stuff. My disagreement is more so, I guess, along the lines of his potential. I mean, we're in somewhat of a bubble here, the sandbox. And I have to look at this from the standpoint of, look, I don't like Sanders doing this, but I also look at this from the standpoint of cause and effect. And I know that sounds pretty almost cynical to say it that way. But I try to think of what would the media be like on the day after Sanders decides to run with the Green Party. And I think back to Walter Wallace, running back in before, I think it was after World War II. Yeah, after World War II. He was like Sanders. He was this main party person who was vice president at one point. He gets pushed out by forces in the Democratic Party who don't necessarily want to go left, kind of similar to what's taking place right now. He runs and gets slaughtered because the media pays no attention to him as he runs as a third party and all of the support that he had. He was the most popular politician in the United States at one point and gets completely ignored when he decides to run for office as a third party. Now, I say that to say that would something similar happen today? And do you require almost like in party? You said yourself that all of these people had came before Sanders, like what's his name? God damn it, I can't think of his name. I voted for him. The lawyer, Ralph Nader, right? Ralph Nader. In addition to, there were several people, King, Jackson, Jesse Jackson, all sorts of people who came and had that message. Kucinich. Why was Sanders? And like you said, Sanders was in the right place at the right time with the right message. And for all intents and purposes, he was running just as a classic Democrat, and what people wanted that didn't necessarily get, and they found it. So that part I agree with you. But I also believe that, and I know this is somewhat cynical, I don't want Sanders every day of the week to have to explain why he doesn't believe in the Russia stuff. And when he's hit with certain things, dealing with, and I can't even look at the camera when I say it because I feel like I'm debasing myself to make the argument, but I think the argument is true. That the reason why he's going along with the Russia nonsense is because ultimately it's easier to go along with the Russia nonsense as opposed to have to deal with that headwind to make his arguments. I don't like that case. I hate having to say it. It debases me to even have to make it the point. But it is, to some degree, I think, true. Now, you could say, well, a real leader would say, push past that and everything else. But in the reality of it, he would get trounced. I mean, he would get utterly trounced trying to make that case that it wasn't Russia. It is us and the media. I mean, it is us and I think Aaron Maté and Michael Tracy and Tucker Carlson. Everybody else is on the side that Russia has something to do with it. Like, it's hard to make this case that he would have to make, like, to push through the nonsense. Let me read these. So, expanding electrons. God, I love that fucking name. What we deserve is Bernie versus Paul. What we get is neoliberalism versus conservatism. Where is the choice? Is essentially, it's no choice. Danny Knapp. Why was Black Men for Bernie website registered in Malaysia and now serving a shady poker site like Banning Mercer generated the websites?
I can answer that.
You can answer that? Go ahead. Go for it.
Well, Bruce Carter is another individual that I called out. I called him out right after the DNC. He was a con man.
You talking about Black Men for Bernie?
Yeah. He was actually, there's news articles about him being the most embarrassing black person of the year.
Wait. I want to talk to you about that. Give me 1 second. Let me reach Trudy's. Mr. Taylor, who is better and more viable than Bernie? Answer that one first, and we can talk about Black Man for Bernie after. Because that's a fascinating conversation, but I kind of want you to answer Trudy. Who, if not Sanders? Or are you just saying this entire system is corrupt, we need a revolution, let's burn this shit down and run to our post office?
No, burn it down. No, not at all. I believe through peaceful means. I'm a revolutionary type guy, and I understand there's 3 stages. Yeah. That's a whole other subject. Who better than Sanders? Any of the working class. Anyone. The house mom from down the street. Joe the plumber. You know why? Because it's nice that these politicians read about our struggles in a book, and they look at the studies and the stats, and they try to figure it out, or they look out a window at our everyday lives trying to put it together and help us. But they will never understand the struggles of the working class, that they have not been in our shoes to understand them. And the same holds way with Bernie Sanders.
That's true.
And being a political figure for over 30 years means he's lost touch with the working class.
Wait. That's true. Wait. That's kind of true, but you're being evasive. You know what her question is. Her question is not what random person on the planet would be better than Sanders. Hell, I picked Jeremy Corbyn. So anybody, like, she's talking about in the sense of who's available. And in the sense of who may run. Now, look, you may say the working mom may run and she may be better off. That's fair. But
there's so many. Barry Johnson, Joe Stein, Sherry Honkala. The list goes on and on. It's just Bernie was in the right place at the right time. And that's it. Bernie is not a god. He is not limited to. He's not the only politician out there preaching about these same issues. He was just in the right place, ran on the Democratic seat to be able to get into the debates, to put his... And then one thing that was said earlier was about the media. Well, if he went with Joe Stein, the blackout, a mainstream, didn't that happen throughout pretty much his entire candidacy, except for the 2 months before? And that was because of the protest of the DNC convention. It was the Bernie or Bust movement that gave him that voice. The only reason he has any platform to stand on is because of the Bernie or Bust movement. That is it. So we're putting way too much weight in behind one individual when this is about we, the people, the working class. There's been plenty of candidates. Plenty. It's just, again, Bernie, and I don't mean to make it sound like this, because if feel free to Google me, YouTube, see how involved I was. I mean, just the expenses alone was about $90,000 loss of income through my business, through what I contributed for the protest of the DNC, and this was for the movement. Yeah. Jesus, I forgot where I was at. We're putting too much weight in behind one person. Bernie is not limited to. And as soon as he steps out of the limelight and he stops sheepdogging on issues that, look, the Democrats are shutting it down. Instead of fixing the system, they're passing new bylaws, which the chair, at their discretion, can decide if you have been loyal to the party or not.
Sufficiently loyal, yeah. I saw that.
Unloyalty, they can stop your candidacy. So tell me how the working class is going to be elected into a political position. Tell me about how throughout the United States, the Democratic Party is the one to go with. Because it is not. It is.
Oh, I don't think that at all. Oh, dude, no. Look, my argument has been a solidarity of no. That you vote for the person who represents your interests. Flats, And with a hard bias towards this idea of, I don't know if you can reform the party. And if you can't reform it, you shouldn't be voting for it. I think Sanders has been sheepdogging. And I hate the fact that Sanders has been sheepdogging. Trudy is kind of asking something different, though. She's asking, look, I think Trudy sees kind of what I see. That for the first time in my lifetime, there is a potential for something. And part of that potential has been a window opened by Sanders. It's not that she thinks he's a god. I don't think he's a god. I have plenty of videos going after Sanders. But it is this thing of there is a window that's been created that he has a certain bearing and a certain perspective that in many issues. It doesn't go far enough for me, but in many issues, he moves the ball in a way that I think substantially moves the ball down the field. And among everybody else on the playing field right now that have any potential that I can see from the standpoint of me looking at this from where I am, he's the only one. Now, I don't believe any of the other candidates that's running as a Democrat has my interests. So it's like it's Sanders, or I just kind of tick off, well, I don't care who runs at that point. And I understand your point of, well, look, the system is corrupted. And so if Sanders is going to run, he's going to run in a system that's fundamentally corrupted.
Well, here goes the other part of it. It's not, I understand the hope. Right now, they refuse to call it a depression, but we're in the middle of a depression. So
Agreed.
It's nice for Americans to have hope. And I get that. But the only way I can really relate this is to the movie Tommy Boy, when Chris Farley said, what did he say? He said, if you want me to shit in a box and put a guarantee on it, I will. But that's what we're getting. If we want real change in this country, we have to stop turning to those that have put this country in that place. The same old voting with your same political correctness or ways, blue no matter who, is just going to get us the same issues.
There we go. Hey, can you hear me? We're back. Ah, bastard. The phone went off. Guys, hold on. Let me get him back. Yeah, let me get it back. There we are. Hey, sorry about that. Every so often my signal flips, and when it flips, it drops my my internet. It does it like 4 times a day, regardless of what takes place. Okay, but I'm sorry. You say you fight for the freedoms. I'm sorry, it went off on that point.
Well, I mean, what really needs to happen for America, because I've worked. One of the things I've done was learned about campaign strategies. I've practiced. I've done a number of campaigns myself, just to, I guess, experience. But really, ideally, to give Americans what they need, we need to try to unite all third parties under an election reform party, and that would form a major party to be able to battle the duopoly come time for the debate.
What about Nick Brana? Brana is doing that. He's God, I can't think of the name of it, but Nick Brana has been trying to unite all of the third parties under one banner.
Right. I'm very well familiar. I've gone to a couple different demonstrations as well as the DNC with Nick Bannon. But that's what has to happen. Otherwise, the only other way that we had it was Bernie joining us in the streets of Philadelphia and running as a Green Party. We're not going to be able to see the America any of us want to see as long as it's working within the Democrat and Republican Party.
That I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you on that. That, like, hands down. I mean, it's both of these parties are co-opted. Like, both of them are bought. And it's one of those things where you start spending a ton of money and you buy one Republican Party, that party gets batshit crazy, and the Democratic Party says, hey, the other party has other people have nowhere else to go, so we can be whatever we want. And we can scream that the only thing that you have to pay attention to is Republican and pay no mind to what we're doing in that office. And we're going to hug blacks and every darkie that we can find, and we're going to call you racist and sexist if you don't vote for us. And then you get half of the country not voting, and people are like, I don't understand why half of the country doesn't vote. It's like, why do you think half of the country doesn't vote? They don't think it matters. They don't think it matters. One of Balthazar says, I won't vote for him as a Democrat. I will if he runs as a third party. So, yeah. So let me ask you this. I'm going to end it on this. Is there anything that you want to tell the audience before I end this that we didn't talk about or that we didn't get around to? I think we had a pretty decent, spirited conversation on some of this stuff.
There's a couple things. I'd like to empower every individual that's listening. Many people feel beat down and belittled by the system, or forced to conform and work within it. That they don't have a power individually. They have to join an organization or just to be heard and do this busy, tire-spinning work that leads us nowhere. But I want to speak as an individual that can tell each and every person, you're more powerful than you can imagine. I am a protester. This is, kind of one of the things I do, I guess. But to give you an example, you can go to the government all you want and ask them, please, until you're blue in the face. But they will simply ignore you, as they've always done. As soon as you go and disrupt their system and their everyday work, and they're not able to do their normal activities, that's when they'll come to you and sit down at the table. That's one of the reasons why protesters will block a road or a bridge. I said, they serve as an artery to a city, and when we block those, the people use the off-roads where it'll shut down and congest the city. Said it'll cost the city up to $1 million in GPA per minute, meaning if a cement truck sits too long, it has to dump its load. The city has multiple jobs, and one of its jobs is to make sure the city flows smoothly. So at that point, that's the reason why protesters will block a road or a bridge. And so real quick on that one, they have contingency plans. So if someone needs to get to the hospital, they have back roads. So major cities are, equipped to handle something of that nature. So the debate against it. But one thing, during 2016, I think everybody can hands down agree that yes, it was rigged for Hillary, but the person that got their hands dirty to make the election fraud and voter suppression happen was Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Shortly after the DNC 2016, she ran against Tim Canova in Florida. And once again, there goes another election that was rigged. Tim Canova, he recently won in court a reference to ballots being destroyed. But that wasn't the only way they cheated. They also used gerrymandering. So there was two forms of voter suppression and election fraud that happened in order to rig an election. We're wiser. We can change this process. Now, in November 6th is Debbie's re-election. Tim is now running as an independent. I cannot stress to everybody how important it is to get to Florida. It's not to support Tim, then protest Debbie. That's something everybody can agree upon. One of our, demands that during the DNC was that she resign. That happened. How are the people? Now, what's happened over the past year is not only Hillary, but other Democrats have been turning their backs on Debbie, which she doesn't have as much of support as she did. So like sharks in water, now there's blood from Debbie. We really need to attack. And if Bernie's not going to do it, we the people need to rise up to do it, to have accountability and some sort of justice from what has happened. Make an example out of her for all the politicians to see that we the people can and do have the power. Now, doing actions, here goes the sad part about America. No one's paying attention. They're not going to. The trends in America are Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. So when you do a protest or an action in order to get people to look, you have to be absurd. You have to be over the top. So don't be afraid to go make a statement. We just ran a campaign 2 days ago just by calling in and shut the phone line down where it's disconnected. So it tells you the power we the people do have. The more suppression you have, the more that would motivate you, because if it tells you that what you're doing is working, they would not spend the time and money countering our actions if it didn't work. So in Florida during that election, re-election for Debbie, if you can't get down there to support Tim Canova, join us. I know there's a group of us that we're going to go down there, and again, we're going to make radical, absurd, peaceful protests against Debbie for the 10-day drive, attempting to stop her from any kind of activities whatsoever during that 10-day drive. She's guilty of treason, and we the people, we can't expect Bernie, obviously, to do it, so we the people need to take actions in our own hands. So my suggestion, if a politician does wrong, don't be afraid to go into the office with a bullhorn 2 inches in their face and let them know how you feel. That is your American right to demonstrate. And it's your American right, if your beliefs go against it, to protest political figures.
Let me read this, but it's something I so agree with you on, and I think you're on the right track with this. So bold like a leopard, Bernie will go down as the Benedict Arnold of his cause. Ref Joan Allen, Matt Fowles, no coverage anywhere, disgraced, only a few of us covering it. So Matt Fowles, so you would be on this point. So one of the things that we found out was the Facebook groups. If you remember, they kept saying the Russians invaded Facebook, the Russians invaded Facebook. And you would have Matt, a guy named Matt, comes out saying that he was the head of this particular Facebook group and that Russians had inundated the group. And you come to find out it's bogus. Rachel Maddow covered it, didn't even nail down the person who was in charge of the group. Come to find out, he wasn't the one in charge of the group. He didn't even own the group. So there's Rachel Maddow just ran the story off as if it was somewhat of a fact, and everybody is screaming that Russians have invaded Facebook groups. It was nonsense. It was complete nonsense. But at that point, the narrative had already made the story, and so what did what do you say? You can get your boot. A lie gets his boots on, or a lie gets across the world before truth gets on his boots. Mark Twain. Balthazar, Democrats are only interested in electoral reform. Electoral reform. I love that. And Balthazar, Debbie does ballots. Hashtag Debbie does ballots. Oh God, that's hilarious. Balthazar is a wizard with putting words together in these awesome, hilarious ways. Dude, I agree with you on this thing of action. So one contradiction. This idea of Sanders and the amount of money he was raising. If you remember, Sanders had raised like $220 million, but at one point he was outraising Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton only got $1 billion only because she ran in the entire of the everyday election. Bernie Sanders stopped raising money within the course of, in like 3 or 4 months. But he was able to raise $200 million. And he was able to do this on 20-something dollars a head, meaning if he would have ran in the entire electoral campaign, Bernie Sanders might have raised $1 billion just off of regular, ordinary people. Meaning, you don't think so?
Absolutely not. And after just because during the primary, that's Hillary Clinton doesn't mean that's actually really super PAC. And she was able to raise other income without publicly, having that accounted for. Just in the Middle East alone, there was 5 dictators that contributed to Hillary's campaign that ranged from $1 to $5 million apiece.
But those are super PACs, right? I mean, that wasn't money going directly to her campaign. Those were going through super PACs.
It doesn't matter. Those super PACs essentially go for Hillary. So I have control of the super PAC. I made the super PAC. The super PAC raises money. It goes out and buys TV ads, yard signs, just like my campaign does.
No. I know, but the money that a super PAC has to spend on an advertisement, especially when you're talking about the media, is more expensive than what a campaign does. Also, a campaign, it is a difference. I mean, let's say it in 2 ways. Yes, from the standpoint of the money that's being spent on a candidate and the way the candidates interact with super PACs, yes, that's true. It often acts as if there is no difference. But technically, there is a difference. And Sanders would have been able to raise nearly $1 billion. Are you saying that's not true, that he wouldn't have been able to raise nearly $1 billion?
No, because I have to disagree, because that money went into super PACs instead of directly to her campaign. They were banking money for the actual presidential election, not just the primary. The primary was in the bag. It was rigged. The fix is in. So why would they have to pump money into the primaries? They were banking their money for, and Trump still outspent Hillary for the general. And between them both, it was $2.7 billion, I think, just for the Trump and Hillary alone's election during 2000.
Wait. Let's break this up, because I want to make sure both of us are talking about the same thing. Bernie Sanders raised $200 billion, over $200 billion within the course of just the primary. That was 3 or 4 months. Are you saying that if he wouldn't have went for the entire election, that he wouldn't have been able to raise nearly $1 billion? I mean, just exponentially from where he was, if you expand that out to the entirety of the race, that's nearly $1 billion. Are you saying that's wrong?
I absolutely think it's wrong. You're talking, what did you have left? It was general, so you're talking 4 or 5 months after the DNC.
Yeah.
When they had so much time before the DNC to be able to raise funds. Now with that kind of limited amount of time, there would be a boost in campaign contributions because it's the presidency. But I do not believe, you have to keep in mind, Bernie limited himself by not taking corporate money, as well as, you can't donate over $2,700.
Right, but those people were only giving like $27. This is kind of what I'm getting at. Part of the thing that they were concerned about with Sanders is because he could always go back and get more money because the people were only donating $27. Whereas Hillary Clinton was getting massive amounts of money, but she could only get those massive amounts of money something like once. Meaning Sanders could always double dip because people were only giving like $20, $30.
The people are broke. I don't see the people being able to compete with big money. The only reason we were successful was because of the use of social media platforms.
But I guess I'm asking something very specific, though. I'm asking something very specific. If Sanders was able to raise $220 million in the course of like 3 months, and it wasn't that he had a head running start. When you look at the book Shattered, they kind of get across this thing that when he started his campaign, he was broke. They didn't have money. So let's say he had 3 months, $220 million from people giving an average of $27 a head. And you're telling me that within the course of 4 or 5 months, when that thing is up and running, that he would have not been able to generate what he was able to generate in the primaries?
What I'm telling you is the numbers that you're basing this upon is the numbers that they want to tell you. And Hillary had more income than what is showing on paper. Just because it didn't go to the primary, which the fix was in on, does not mean that money still came in.
But I'm not asking about Hillary. I'm asking specifically about Sanders. I'm asking a completely different. I'm devoiding this of Hillary at this point. I'm trying to nail down what we're saying.
No, I don't believe Bernie would have been able to raise over $1 billion. I don't see it happening.
Well, I said nearly $1 billion. I didn't say over $1 billion. And even then, I still think he probably could have hit $1 billion. And the reason why I say this is, you had people who were jazzed up and energetic about the idea of Sanders running. Sanders, month after month after month, was beating the stuffing out of Hillary Clinton and the money that she was raising in that primary. And the only reason that started to go down, even when it looked like Sanders was going to lose, he was still outraising her. Like it was like a month or two afterwards where he started to kind of go down. I'm saying that if
individually though, it's not, and not only that, every time what would happen is every time some kind of corruption, voter suppression, election fraud would happen, that's when there would be a boost in donations, because the Democratic Party rigged it. And every time there was some kind of foul play is when there would be a boost in donations. We ran those campaigns. It wasn't even within the campaign office. It was, again, I got to bring it back to social media platforms. How many times would you go on social media and there would be another $27 drive because the DNC did X, Y, Z. Now, when you're running up against Trump, it's a different climate altogether. But you also have to keep in mind, if he's the Democratic nominee, he also has big money coming his way as well, even though a super PAC may not be able to endorse him. So it's possible. It's possible. There's too many. But I don't see it happening. I don't see that was. I don't think the people have that kind of money.
Now,
when you talk about half Americans don't vote or are interested in the process. You know,
but I think part of the way that Sanders was able to pull that money and pull people into the process was because those half that don't vote would have voted. Like, the reason why Sanders was able to beat the stuffing out of Trump in the polls wasn't because of regular voters. It was because he was pulling in independents from the process. They looked at him as being something fundamentally different. So they were willing to give their hopes. When part of the thing that I've seen when I've talked to people that were so angry about it was because they thought he was different. They were like, they were people who were pulled into the process because of who he was. And as a second point, Democrats didn't used to outraise Republicans. Like, this is somewhat of a new phenomenon in politics. At one point, you used to have the thing where Democrats would always assumed to not be able to raise more money than Republicans, that ultimately they had manpower that would supplement this idea of the amount of money that they were getting. Republicans represented the rich, Democrats supposed to represent the workers, and you use labor and labor power to kind of compete with the money. Well, that's been turned on its head with the new Democratic Party, but that doesn't necessarily mean that wouldn't have been able to work with Trump. And Trump was outraised 2-1. I mean, Hillary Clinton had the big money at her disposal. I mean, do you agree with that?
There was a couple things there, but ultimately, yeah, I do agree. Can I make one comment though? Because everybody keeps saying that there's something that people overlook. Bernie could have hurt America like nobody understands, because he did. He engaged more young voters in the political process than ever. But when he caters, because we knew Bernie was going to endorse Hillary months before. This was during the DNC. Yes, the organizers, the lead organizers of the protest events, we knew the fix was in. But now all these young they're engaged in the process. Once he endorses Hillary and caters, they're going to be discouraged until without a home and be like the rest of Americans, where they will no longer want to be engaged.
That's true.
Now, this is where the real revolution in Philadelphia happened, because all of the lead organizers, protests, everybody agreed hands down that we were going to denounce the party and make the shift to green. Joe Stein offering the handout, the platform, meaning stepping down and letting Bernie run as the presidential nominee of the Green Party, plus the platform being identical. It was an easy transition to be able to do so. So all these young minds that would regularly go, government, F that, it's rigged. Now we can keep them involved in the process through the Green Party. Yeah. So even though, these are individuals that think like us, vote like us, fight for the same issues as us. Your party identity, or, I like to call it gang affiliation, really doesn't matter. And that's where the real revolution was had in Philadelphia, but that's also something nobody looks at when it comes to how Bernie could have hurt America. Because those young voters, he just got them involved, but then made them disengage where they'll never want to be involved in this political process again. And it was we the people to be able to make that transition to keep them engaged.
That part I agree with you on. Like, I think there are two things that are going to take place. African Americans have a particular view of the Republican Party. And part of that view comes just from this idea of, the races are another party. It was one of those things that is cultural. It's understood, like breathing is understood in other people. And part of that was done just from what took place from the standpoint of the civil rights legislation and the voter rights legislation. And after that, I suspect that something like this is going to happen with lefties, the Democratic Party, and what has taken place in 2016. I suspect this is going to drive deep, where there are going to be some people that have extreme headwind to trying to ever voting for a Democrat after what's taken place in 2016. I think you're right. I really do. I think you're right.
Peter, you made a comment about Bruce Carter. He's an individual.
Yes. I want to let me say one thing first. Peter, version 1. Nice to see you doing news at a normal time. I know, right? Because usually it's not 2 a.m. we doing news. Bruce Carter. So this Bruce Carter was Black Men for Bernie. Did you know him?
Yes, I was when he originally got off the fleet of minivans. I was the individual that linked up with him, was able to get volunteers to drive those minivans from Texas all the way up to the eastern, northeastern.
Wow, that's amazing. So what the hell happened, and why did people hate his guts? I've read the story, and I went through the story, and I saw TYT attack the guy. I had a difference of opinion on it, but what was taking place on this? I'm curious about this from the perspective of people on the ground talking to him.
All right, so the involvement I had with Bruce, we basically, he took off touring the country with his RV, and he left a fleet of minivans here in Philadelphia. Yeah. So Gary Frazier out of Camden and I, he served as co-chair at one time with Philly.fyi. We used those for guerrilla-style campaign tactics. I did a lot of good with it. Bruce had a con he wanted to run out of the FDR Park. It was a food voucher con where $30 a day for 5 days, $150 a person. Buys food. He needed to get his RV in there to transport the food. He wanted to basically a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a water in a brown paper bag 3 times a day like that. That I didn't go for it. That's why I wound up losing the Black Men for Bernie office on Broad Street. But before this, we knew he was a con man because we looked into it's a little bit of digging, but he ran same thing. It was a food voucher con in Texas where he got $600,000 from the government. There was food. This was for low-income houses, the children of them. So there was hungry kids that went hungry. There's food that went to waste in a factory. Workers never got paid. Right. So we were on alert of who Bruce was, but we still tried to utilize, one, he was doing good for the movement, getting people involved. And we tried to utilize the assets he brought with him, like the minivan. But afterwards, we tried to get him to push towards Bill Stein, and he was the only one that would not go Bill Stein. He was a businessman. Black Men for Bernie was a business. It wasn't a campaign, nonprofit, anyway. So he had people volunteer, and they served the church to make money and so on, but basically it was free workers. People thought it was a campaign, but it wasn't. So after the DNC, he went with the money. Trump paid, it was $100,000, but he also raked in other donations, donations along the way that ranged $5,000, $10,000, so it was more than just that $100,000. Mm-hmm. And this was after the DNC. And it was to co-opt the movement. So it was said that it was +1 if he was able to get the people of color to not vote for Hillary. It was +2 if he could get them to vote for Trump. So he basically is a comment. Right now he's down in your area. So I think Virginia, South Carolina, I think it is. where he's working with a priest, and again trying to do the same kind of con within politics, where they set up events and they charge $5,000 a table for police. And I had someone reach out from the group he was putting together down there and questioning Bruce. That's how I know everything that I know. But he's doing the same thing, trying to still ride within, I guess, politics.
Yeah.
Because many people don't understand that he is a business. He's not a nonprofit or a campaign where you can volunteer your efforts. And he takes advantage of that. One of the things he did was he had these cards. It was a barbecue package for like $40 or $50, and on the other side it said helping out the youth in low-income communities, saying how it's a revolving door for these young men once they get caught up in the system. And he came with a good song and dance, where you believe in him. He's a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
Where he wants to break that cycle. He wants to give them $10,000 grants, put them in teaching classes. This way they can break that cycle and become businessmen instead of going, where that recurring system. But that never happened. He made those flyers. If you go to the website to register, the date to register was long before the flyers were even printed. So he would sell these barbecue packages. He's a vulture. He goes into the most hurt, most needy communities, and he preys upon the people as if he's going to help them, taking advantage in any way whatsoever.
Wow. I didn't realize it was, I didn't realize he was that bad of a con man. When the Black Men for Bernie thing came out, I took it as he was injured and pissed off, and so he went for Trump in order to kind of stop Clinton. But you're saying that's not it. He just went for Trump just because that's where the dollars were. Because
of the money, yep. We tried to talk him into going, what was it, Black Men for Jail? We'll rewrap the vans. We really, there was a number of things that could have happened in Philadelphia if Bernie would have joined us, because we could have rewrapped them for the Green Party. The revolution was there, but the figurehead, and I'm saying figurehead because he wasn't a leader. A leader goes down with the ship, and that he did not do. Did not step up. And then there's other co-ops as well along the movement that has happened outside of just Bruce Carter.
Yeah.
You got to think COINTELPRO released information that as far back in the 60s at federal and political events, 1 out of 6 participants was FBI informant.
1 out of 6? It was that bad. I didn't realize it was that bad. 1 out of 6. Jesus Christ. Like, I know what COINTELPRO is. I didn't realize it was that infiltrated. That number is just so high. Wow. Jesus
Makes you think. In social media, you gotta, not everybody's who they say they are. So with social media, everything from fake accounts, the FBI hired 1,000 workers just to monitor social media and report back to social media companies. Not to do anything, just to report to social media companies. So that's why, the reason why, I do plan on protesting Bernie again if possible. I know in order to make noise, one of the best ways is to protest the most popular politician we have. And these are issues that are being overlooked that, he should be fighting for. In my heart, it's not, that, cheating spouse kind of hurt thing. It's he got all these people involved in this process saying he would fight the corruption. Let's fight the corruption. He does have the power and ability to change things that'll last long term. But he's sheepdogging on these issues that'll never be heard or never be long term because the next administration will shoot him down.
It's funny. People hate that term sheepdog, but I think it fits. Like,
right.
Even somebody who likes Sanders, I still, if Sanders ran in 2020, he'd get my vote in a heartbeat. No issue. But call it what it is. I mean, it is literally sheepdogging. They asked him about 2016. I think it was Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera asked him about 2016 and why he didn't push for it. He's like, I'm trying to fight Trump and all this other stuff. He was like, he didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't something he necessarily wanted to bring up. He's always sheepish about it. Dude, Billy Taylor, thank you for coming on the show, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I hope people understand your point of view, and a lot of it I agree with. I mean, I don't necessarily, he is sheepdogging, and pushing this Russia stuff I think is hurting what he's trying to do, because I think the Russia stuff is going to come back around to this thing of, well, status quo didn't lose. Hillary Clinton didn't lose on her own merits. Hillary Clinton lost because of Russia, and Vladimir Putin wanted you to be in that, wanted you to hurt her and this type of stuff. I think all of this stuff is going to be thrown in his face when he runs again, if he runs again in 2020. But we'll see. We'll see. Executive Director for Philly.FYI, lead organizer against the protests, or with the protests against the DNC, Billy Taylor. Thank you very much. All right, guys. I am ending this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support the Patreon. Thanks, everyone.